She was a young mother who had turned her entire life around. Nursing school textbooks bought, and her heart was overflowing for her infant son. But for 700 days, the city of Auburn, Maine, didn't even know she was missing.
A terrifying video call, a house described as a war zone, and a digital trail that ends with a single hopeful Facebook post. How does a person vanish for 2 years without a single report to the police?
This week on Crime Salad, the disappearance of Celeste Doghmi.
Is she a voluntary missing adult, or did the system ignore the cries for help until it was too late?
I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. In southern Maine, along the banks of the Androscoggin River, sits the city of Auburn. Old brick factory buildings still line the waterfront, leftovers from a time when textile mills hummed around the clock and thousands of workers filled the streets before sunrise. These days, Auburn is quieter. Neighborhoods are tucked between wooded hills or winding roads, and just across the river is Lewiston. The two cities are linked by several bridges, making them feel more like a connected community.
And in the summer months, Auburn comes alive. The sun doesn't set until almost 9 o'clock, and you'll find people along the river paths, families at Lake Auburn, Taylor Pond, neighbors grilling in their backyards while kids ride their bikes up and down the sidewalks. It's the kind of place where the long Maine daylight makes you feel like nothing could go wrong.
But in the summer of 2021, something deeply unsettling happened here. A young mother vanished. Days passed, then weeks, then months, and somehow no one reported her missing. By the time authorities were alerted, nearly 2 years had passed since anyone could say for certain that they had seen her alive. Her name is Celeste Doghmi.
And the question that still hasn't been answered: how does someone disappear for nearly 2 years without anyone realizing they're gone?
Now, Celeste's story, it didn't begin in Maine. She was actually born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1993. Near Frankfurt was Rhein-Main Air Base. It was a major U.S. Air Force installation that operated from 1945 to 2005, and it was sometimes called the Gateway to Europe. During the Cold War, thousands of U.S. military personnel were stationed in the region, and Celeste's father was one of them. It's unclear whether he was a German or American native, but what we do know is that when Celeste was just 2 years old in 1995, she moved to the United States with her mother. They were trying to make things work with Celeste's father, and they ultimately settled in Florida.
And as Celeste grew up, people started to see who she really was. Open, full of life, the kind of person who left an impression on everyone she met. Her mother said that you always knew what Celeste was feeling because of this constant smile that just lit up on her face. She had a big heart, cared deeply about people, almost to a fault. She always saw the potential in the people around her and believed she could help them grow into what they could be.
Over the years, the family moved around the southern United States, but Florida remained the place most closely tied to Celeste's early life. And eventually, as an adult, Celeste ended up settling on her own in Auburn, Maine. And that's where the beginning of our story takes place. On May 3rd, 2023, Auburn police arrived at Celeste's door on Academy Street regarding a custody matter. Her child's father had been arrested, and they needed Celeste to take custody of her son. But she didn't answer the door.
So the police started reaching out. Friends, family, anyone who might know where she was. And that's when it became clear that no one knew. And no one had known for a really long time.
The responding officer created a missing person report and flagged it as a suspicious condition. And after digging further, investigators learned that Celeste's last known whereabouts were in July of 2021. This is almost 2 years before anyone had reported her missing.
2 years. And I want people to sit with this for a second, because that number isn't just a timeline problem. It's an evidence problem. But we'll get to that.
With this information, after consulting with state and federal law enforcement, Auburn police sought help from the public in locating 29-year-old Celeste. They noted that her family, who had returned to Germany, hadn't had contact with her for 2 years. They released her photo, hoping someone might be able to confirm her whereabouts from after July 2021. And as the case pressed on, Auburn police worked closely with Maine Public Safety, trying to piece together what had happened.
And one of the things that made this case so hard from the start is that it wasn't unusual for Celeste to go long stretches without talking to people. She'd lost touch with her mother, drifted from close friends, but from the outside, her life looked fine. Her social media suggested she was busy, moving in a positive direction. So people filled in the silence with hope instead of concern.
But in the days following the news release, people from Celeste's past started coming forward, and the picture that emerged was far more complicated than anyone expected. Celeste's mother, Stephanie, confirmed a few things: that Celeste was born in Germany, she came to the U.S. in '95, and spent her formative years in Florida. And even with that sparkling personality, things became challenging for Celeste as she got older. She struggled at home and at school, and as tensions grew, she left home, she stayed with friends on and off, and started using drugs and drinking. She got tighter with her childhood friends, started seeing boys, and grew into her independence. And this is all according to Stephanie, that this is when things took a turbulent turn.
And this is where you start to see a pattern that follows Celeste for years. She forms deep bonds with people around her, finds stability for a while, and then something pulls her away from it.
Melissa Bonacci was one of those people. She knew Celeste back in 2001 when Celeste and her mother moved to Largo, Florida, a hub in Pinellas County, right between Tampa and the Gulf beaches. Melissa and Celeste's mother were practically neighbors, both single-parent families, and Celeste became so close to them that she called Melissa Auntie Mel, and Melissa's brother Uncle Sean. They were family. But the Bonaccis and Celeste lost touch when Celeste and her mother moved in 2005. Years later, in 2012, Melissa saw Celeste again, and Celeste had changed. She wasn't in school and seemed to be in distress, both emotionally and physically. Melissa invited Celeste to stay with her, which she did off and on.
During her teenage years, Celeste had a few run-ins with law enforcement, once for smoking on school property while underage, and some other more serious charges later, around 19 or 20. And once someone starts going down that road, it can be really, really hard to get off of it.
Celeste's high school friend, Gina Hudnall, also came forward, and she said Celeste had stayed with her family for about 3 years while attending high school in Largo. And she described Celeste's upbringing as rough and talked about her struggles with addiction. But according to everyone who knew her, Celeste wanted to turn her life around. She just didn't know how. So in 2018, right after another brush with law enforcement, Celeste and her mother moved to Louisiana together. Stephanie was serious about giving Celeste a fresh new start, and a new environment was how she planned to do it.
And Celeste had a clear vision for what she wanted: a partner, a family, children of her own. She knew a fresh start might be the only way to get there.
In Louisiana, Celeste started working as a landscaper in Slidell, a quiet, nature-focused town on the northeast shore of Lake Pontchartrain, about 30 minutes from New Orleans. And that's where she met a man named John Alexander Benton, who also worked in landscaping. In May of 2018, Celeste changed her Facebook status to "in a relationship."
Now, her mother, Stephanie, she was not on board with this. She didn't really know John, but from what she did know, she definitely didn't like him. And as you can imagine, this made things even more strained between the two of them. This was a wedge being driven right down the middle of their family, and John was holding the hammer.
Despite the disagreements, when Stephanie moved from Louisiana to Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, a charming seaside town with a laid-back, artistic atmosphere, Celeste and John came with her. And that's when Stephanie started to see the other side of John. She described a house turned upside down by drugs, screaming, and physical wrestling that was clearly one-sided. She called the police multiple times, but like so many domestic calls, nothing really came of it.
And that's one of the most dangerous outcomes in domestic violence situations. When law enforcement doesn't intervene, the abuser can feel emboldened, and the victim can feel even more trapped. So the lack of action may have actually made Celeste's situation worse.
Eventually, Stephanie stood up to John directly and told him things would escalate past just phone calls to the police if he didn't stop. And for a moment, it seemed to work. John packed up and went back to Maine. Stephanie thought she won. She even tried to block the communication between them, but eventually felt she was overstepping. She didn't want to dictate her daughter's life, so she backed off.
And that's all John needed. He found an opening through email. 6 weeks later, despite the bruises and the police calls, Celeste packed her bags and left for Maine to be with him. Statistically, it takes a survivor an average of 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship for good. The pull of the ideal version of that partner, the person they are when they're apologizing, promising to change, is often stronger than the fear of the violent version, especially when you're isolated from everyone who loves you.
So Celeste moved to Maine to be with Benton in 2018 and stayed with his family at first. By early 2019, the two moved into their own place, the apartment on Academy Street, the same door police would knock on 4 years later. Meanwhile, the people from Celeste's earlier life completely lost contact with her. Everyone assumed that she started a new, happy life. Melissa Bonacci said that when she did get a glimpse of Celeste, she seemed to be on a better path, thriving even. The troubles from her youth seemed to be behind her.
But it didn't last. In 2020, while Melissa was away from Florida for the pandemic, she got a call from her mother. Celeste had shown up in Largo looking for Melissa.
Celeste told Melissa's mother that she was trying to start over again. She'd been in a relationship with a man who was extremely abusive. She was pregnant, and she needed somewhere to stay to get out and get on the right path. Her longtime friend, Chris Worthy, also saw Celeste during this time, and he said that she was happy about the pregnancy, but physically, she wasn't doing well. She was skinny, hungry, exhausted when she fled from Maine. Chris and his family stepped in to help her recover.
And here's the thing that everyone who knew Celeste agreed on. This pregnancy changed everything. Her friend Gina Hudnall said Celeste made a complete 180, throwing herself into motherhood. She was calling friends, asking about sunscreen, teething medicine, what kind of perfume was safe to wear around a baby. She was particular about everything she put in her body and everything in her baby's environment. This wasn't someone going through the motions. She was all in.
Melissa encouraged Celeste to stay in Florida, promising to open her home and give her a stable place as soon as she got back. Her other friend, Chris, pleaded with her to do the same. Her support system was fighting hard to keep her safe.
It's incredibly difficult to break the pull of an abusive, manipulative relationship. John zeroed in on her greatest vulnerability, her lifelong dream of having a real family. He used her own optimism to convince her to come back to Maine. She didn't go back because she was ignoring her friends. She went back because John exploited her trust.
So back in Maine, Celeste focused on her baby, and she tried to build a new future. According to Stephanie, her mother, she was working in the kitchen of a large manufacturing company in the Lewiston, Auburn area and was in the process of enrolling in a nursing program. She would always talk about how much she wanted to be a nurse for the babies in the ICU. She purchased her first semester textbooks, attended an orientation. She was driven and wanted to secure a wonderful future for her and her baby.
But there were signs that the life she was presenting didn't match what was happening behind closed doors. Chris Worthy, who made a point to talk to Celeste nearly every day, said something that really stood out to me. In all of their video calls, Celeste never seemed to leave the apartment. Not once. She wasn't working anymore, her classes were going to be online, and everything in her life existed within those 4 walls. Whether it was by choice or not, she was contained.
And inside that space, her friend Chris said Celeste showed him what looked like more than 100 cannabis plants throughout the apartment. She told him Benton was growing them to supplement income, and that she was the one responsible for harvesting and selling it at Benton's direction while he was at work. Chris said it was a stressful, unstable environment, and also a dangerous one for her and her baby.
And this is a control tactic that doesn't get talked about enough. By involving Celeste in the grow operation, she couldn't call the police about violence without exposing the drugs. That meant risking losing her child to the state, or worse, being deported back to Germany with a criminal record. It's leverage. Abusers force their victims into illegal activity specifically so they can't ask for help. It chips away at your values until you're doing things that you hate just to keep some type of peace.
By early July of 2021, the concerns around Celeste's safety were no longer subtle. On July 6th, Chris Worthy spoke with her over a video call, and during that call, Celeste showed him something that immediately scared him. A bald spot on the top of her head, a patch of hair completely missing. Chris told her that she needed to come back to Florida immediately. He offered to buy the plane tickets, do whatever it took to get her out of there. And at that moment, it seemed like Celeste was actually going to go. She started tearing up the cannabis plants in the apartment, getting ready to leave for good. And then John came home.
According to Chris, John started yelling at Celeste, asking what was she doing, calling her stupid, saying she was going to get their baby taken away. John grabbed at the phone, it fell, and the call disconnected.
Chris tried to reach her again. He called over 20 times. She never answered. It was the last time he ever heard from her.
And he knew, even though the people told him that he was overreacting, even though Celeste had a history of going off the grid, Chris knew this was different. She always got back to him, either to let him know that she was okay or to ask for help. This time, there was nothing.
But here's what made it confusing for everyone else. Celeste was still posting on Facebook after that call. Posts centered completely around her son. In one, she said that she was watching him and her heart was overflowing with love and pride. She said she made this amazing little dude and didn't know how she deserved such a gift. In another, she shared advice with other mothers about protecting babies from summer heat, a reminder that baby skin is 7 times thinner than their mother's, warning against prolonged sun exposure.
And according to Melissa Bonacci, Celeste made additional posts that are no longer visible on her timeline, including one about being accepted into college, calling it her second greatest accomplishment after giving birth. A few days later, she posted again saying her GED transcripts came through. She was signing up for classes, everything was paid, and she already had her textbooks.
And that was her final Facebook post. No more calls, no messages, no updates. After August of 2021, no one in Celeste's life heard from her again, and no one would say anything to law enforcement for 2 years.
And John Benton never contacted the police to report her gone. Not once.
For 2 years, Celeste Doghmi was not listed as a missing person. That changed in April of 2023, not because someone reported her missing, but because John Benton was arrested for domestic violence against another girlfriend. Following that arrest, he lost custody of the child he shared with Celeste.
A caseworker from the Maine Office of Child and Family Services described the home environment the child was living in as a war zone. After everything Celeste did to protect that baby, the sunscreen, the safe perfumes, the obsessing over every detail, that's what her son was living in.
As part of that custody process, authorities tried to locate Celeste. When they couldn't find her, the responding officer created the missing person report on May 3rd, 2023. And for Celeste's family, the reality was only beginning to set in. Stephanie said she and Celeste's sister, Danielle, had distanced themselves, not because they didn't care, but because watching Celeste stay in the relationship with John, despite everything, was breaking Stephanie's heart. At the time, they didn't realize how isolated Celeste had become, and they didn't know she wasn't in contact with anyone.
And here's what makes it worse. Stephanie didn't even know Celeste had been pregnant. She only found out after Danielle, Celeste's younger sister, started sending her photos once the baby was born in early 2021. And Stephanie assumed that because Danielle was sending pictures, the two sisters were in regular contact. But as she started calling around, it became clear no one had actually heard from Celeste in nearly 2 years.
And what's even more frustrating is that the state had information. When Celeste gave birth, she confided in hospital staff that John had been physically abusive throughout her entire pregnancy. It was documented.
And it took months for OCFS to follow up on that report. Months. By the time they showed up at the apartment on Academy Street, John was already in custody for assaulting someone else, and Celeste was just gone. The agency declined to comment, citing privacy protocols. Stephanie couldn't even find out if her grandson was in state custody. Her emails and calls to the DHHS ombudsman went unanswered.
One day, Chris Worthy received a text from Stephanie telling him Celeste was gone, that John said she went for a walk and never came back.
She just went for a walk. That's the story? A woman who was posting about her baby every day, who had textbooks bought, who was planning a future, just walked out the door and never looked back? And the people who knew Celeste best, not a single one of them actually believed this.
So Chris Worthy, he always knew something wasn't right. Looking back at that final video call after Celeste ripped up the plants, after John came home, and after the phone went dead, Chris believes there was something critical in that moment. He said she knew he was scared for her that night, and she would have called back. She always called back. What John was doing, whether he intended it or not, has a name. It's called coercive control. You cut something off from everyone who loves them, and suddenly you're the only voice they hear. Nearly half of all domestic violence survivors report experiencing isolation tactics. And if that's what happened to Celeste, it worked. Because at first, most people didn't think anything of it.
Even Gina Hudnall, Celeste's close friend from high school, she didn't question the silence at first. She figured Celeste was busy. Motherhood, school, building the life she always wanted. But when she heard John's story about how she just walked out, nobody bought it. Those who knew her best said she would never willingly leave her child.
By 2022, the silence became harder to explain. Melissa Bonacci said calls went unanswered, messages went unread. She started reaching out to everyone she could think of, trying to find anyone who had heard from Celeste. No one had. Celeste's mother and sister had returned to Germany. No one Melissa spoke with had any way to reach them. And by then, months had already passed.
And I keep coming back to this comparison Ashley made when we were first researching this, the Nikki Andamando case. Nikki had a paper trail a mile long. Hospital records, police reports, therapist documentation, and it was still hard for people to believe her. Celeste had none of that. No 911 calls from the apartment, no ER visits, not even a noise complaint. She was a German citizen in a town where she barely knew anyone.
And there's another case that haunts me. Launeen Rogers. Her husband Clinton, Bud Rogers, told police that after an argument during a blizzard, Launeen just walked out into the snow and never came back, leaving her 2 children behind. For over 40 years, that was the story. And it wasn't until 2025 that he was finally charged with her murder. And when I hear John Benton say Celeste went for a walk and never came back, it just sounds like the same story.
It's the same playbook, and the system often takes it at face value because it's easier to see a troubled woman than a victim.
Yeah, according to the 2022 Maine Crime Victimization Report, over 68% of victims in Maine do not report crimes to law enforcement. Fear of retaliation, the belief that police can't or won't do anything. Trying to piece together proof beyond witness statements in Celeste's case was nearly impossible.
And I want to put that into perspective. Celeste wasn't reported missing until 2 years after she was last seen. You know what that means for evidence? CCTV footage at gas stations or intersections, it gets overridden every 30 to 60 days. Cell phone tower pings and detailed location logs are typically purged after a year. By the time police knew there was something to investigate, the digital breadcrumbs were already gone.
As investigators started looking more closely at John Benton, the picture got darker. Records show he already had a criminal history prior to meeting Celeste. Reports link him to assault, violations of protective orders, and theft of property crimes. Though we want to be careful to note that that's all based on background check reporting, not confirmed court records. In August of 2022, Benton was arrested in Cumberland County, which led to an indictment in November, including domestic violence assault, aggravated assault, and unlawful sexual contact. Then on April 3rd of 2023, he was arrested again and later indicted on multiple charges: domestic violence, aggravated assault, criminal threatening with a firearm or dangerous weapon, violating conditions of release, and criminal restraint.
That second arrest is what triggered the custody process, which is the only reason anyone went looking for Celeste in the first place.
On August 28, 2023, John Benton was convicted on charges spanning both cases. In Cumberland County, he was convicted of domestic violence assault, 2 counts of violating conditions of release, and 2 counts of domestic violence aggravated assault, receiving 7 years with all but 18 months suspended, followed by 4 years of probation. In York County, he was convicted of domestic violence aggravated assault, multiple counts of operating without a license, and additional violations, receiving 3 years with all but 12 months suspended, plus 4 years of probation.
And I want to make sure that people understand what suspended means here. The judge officially puts a portion of the jail time on hold. So Benton doesn't serve it right away, but it hangs over him. If he violates probation, the judge can unsuspend it at any time and send him back. So in practice, he's back on the streets way sooner than those headline numbers suggest.
He was held at Cumberland County Jail until sentencing, then transferred to the Maine Correctional Center in Windham. His earliest possible release date was July 15, 2024. Since then, he's been basically a ghost. We found someone on Reddit claiming that he's out and on dating apps in Greater Portland, but that's unconfirmed. There's other sources that say he served about 1 year and now he has full custody of Celeste's son.
Full custody of a child whose mother is missing and whose home was described as a war zone.
The statements from law enforcement came from Timothy Kugel, the deputy chief of the Auburn Police Department. He said it's uncommon for this length of time to pass without someone reporting a missing person, but that since Celeste was from another country, had limited contact with family overseas, and didn't appear to have strong connections in the area, adults have the right to free movement. They don't have to contact anyone if they don't want to.
And I understand the legal reality of that statement, but calling Celeste from another country overlooks the fact that she moved here when she was only 2 years old. And yeah, whatever, her mother and sister went back to Germany, but she had people, Melissa, Chris, Gina. She had people who considered her family.
Stephanie ended up writing a letter to the Maine DHHS Ombudsman's office, expressing her frustration that John never reported Celeste missing. Instead, he moved another woman into the apartment. And because Celeste was so isolated, it doesn't seem like anyone asked questions about that. Even when the mother of Benton's next domestic violence victim reached out to speak to Stephanie through Facebook, asking for help keeping him behind bars, Celeste's case stayed cold. The Sun Journal, who comprehensively covered this case, reached out to the victim and her mother. Only the victim replied, confirming she knew Benton and was familiar with his charges, but declined to comment further. The Maine Department of Corrections declined to allow Benton to speak with the Sun Journal without giving a reason.
The most recent update is that the investigation has been transferred from Auburn PD to the Maine State Police Major Crimes Unit, which we confirmed through Celeste's case file on the MSP website.
Many people believe authorities still haven't conducted a full forensic investigation. searches of her last known location, tracking phone logs, financials, cell location history, and that goes back to the legal challenges. Police are often hesitant to spend resources on a no-body forensic search, which requires search warrants with probable cause. Getting a judge to sign off on a forensic sweep of a private home years after the fact is a massive legal mountain to climb.
But it is worth noting that Celeste is not being treated as a simple voluntary missing adult. Her information appears on the FBI's VICAP website. That's the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, as of July 2025. That system cross-references missing persons cases with unidentified remains across the entire country. You don't end up on VICAP unless foul play is strongly suspected.
The FBI's profile lists her as last seen on June 1st, 2021 at the apartment on Academy Street. They noted her distinguishing characteristics, a large dream catcher tattoo with feathers on her right leg, and the name John tattooed on her left breast.
They also noted that despite her disappearance going unreported, she was a mother who had just given birth and was actively enrolling in college classes. And those aren't the actions of someone who walks away from their life.
Police have confirmed that subpoenas have been issued for Celeste's phone records and bank accounts. Investigators also followed up with the community college where she planned to attend and learned that Celeste never actually completed her enrollment, even though she made social media posts saying she had everything lined up.
Which raises its own set of questions. Was she prevented from finishing the process? Was someone else posting on her behalf? Or did something happen before she had the chance?
As the investigation continues, there are still critical steps that many believe need to happen. A thorough forensic search of the areas where Celeste was last known to be, the apartment, basements, gardens, abandoned buildings nearby, the railroad tracks just 200 feet away, and the Androscoggin River. Specialized search teams, including K-9 units from Maine search and rescue dogs. A deeper dive into her digital and financial footprint to establish a clearer timeline. And above all, continued public awareness. The most recent post on the Search for Celeste Facebook page puts it plainly. Celeste's disappearance is not a cold case. It's an open wound. A young mother would have not simply just walked away from her child. If Celeste were alive, she would have found a way to reach out, especially for her son. The fact that she vanished without a trace or any belongings is deeply alarming.
Celeste's family, including Stephanie, believe that Celeste is no longer alive, and that something or someone terrible is responsible. No one who knew her believes that she would have left her baby behind. Even with the struggles between Celeste and her mother, Stephanie is certain of that.
Celeste was 27 years old when she disappeared in 2021. She was a mother rebuilding her life, someone who had fought through addiction, trauma, and instability, and was finally looking ahead. She had school, a career path, and a future for her son. In her own words, she was excited, proud, and hopeful. She was becoming someone who didn't want to disappear anymore, and that's exactly why we don't believe she did. Someone out there may still have information, no matter how small it seems. Celeste is a young Black woman, 5'2", approximately 110 pounds, with curly brown hair, brown eyes, and piercings in her nose, ears, and tongue. She has a tattoo of a dream catcher on her upper right leg. And if you know anything about the disappearance of Celeste Doghmi, you're encouraged to contact Maine State Police through their website's tip line or use the anonymous tip line for the Auburn Police Department at 207-333-6653. Even the smallest piece of information could help.
Cases like this only move forward when people keep talking about them, so her name isn't forgotten.
That's our show for today. If Celeste's story hit you the way it hit us, do us a favor, leave us a rating and review wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Those reviews are how new listeners find us, and that's how these stories reach more people.
You can find Crime Salad merch at crimesaladpodcast.com. And if you want to listen to ad-free episodes and support what we do here, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/crimesaladpodcast.
And share this episode with a friend. Keep Celeste's name alive. We will see you next time.